Santa Clarita's hometown station, KHTS. Hey, make sure you go to hometownstation.com for all the latest and greatest Santa Clarita has to offer. And speaking of the greatest Santa Clarita has to offer, I'm going to have Carl Goldman take over here for just a sec. Carl Goldman in studio with a special guest.
It seems like it was 5 minutes ago that we had the presidential election, maybe 6 minutes. But a year's already gone by, and now as we start sliding to the end of 2017, we're going to start gearing up for the congressional races and also a number of other local races here in Santa Clarita, and when we get into November of 2018. But that means campaigns are already started, and people are positioning themselves and jockeying for positions, and it's my privilege to have one of those jockeyers. We were talking about horses a minute ago off the air, but one of those jockeyers is Jess Phoenix, who is running as one of the Democratic possibilities for the 25th Congressional District, Steve Knight's current position, and welcome here.
Thank you so much, Carl and Kyle. This is a really great honor to be here, and I'm so happy you wanted to have me.
So let's learn a little bit about you first. And I just learned off the air that you live up in Acton, but where did you grow up, Jess?
That's a trick question because my parents were FBI agents, so we moved a lot. It's sort of
goodness.
like
both parents were FBI
both
agents.
of them. My mom was one of the wave of the first female agents in the Bureau after Hoover left in the 70s. So she and my dad met at FBI Training Academy in Quantico, Virginia, where all true romances are formed, and then proceeded to move around wherever the government needed him to go. And so I was born in New Jersey, lived in Virginia, went to high school in Colorado, and then college in Massachusetts, and hated the cold. And I actually came out here to go to grad school at Cal State LA in 2007, and I fell in love with it. And I met my now husband here in LA. He's a Simi Valley, Moore Park native, and so we moved out to Simi a few years back, but there wasn't quite enough room because we do horse rescue, so we ended up in Acton because there's a little more space out there, and we love it.
And we'll talk a little bit about the horse rescue in a few minutes, but why don't you share with us what made you decide to jump into the arena here and run for the congressional seat?
It's a great question because I am a geologist, and we don't have any other geologists in federal office right now, and I do volcano research specifically and natural hazards. So most people say, wow, I didn't think about a volcano scientist running for Congress, and I said, well, there's a good reason for that. There's one scientist in Congress right now, and he's a physicist. So I figured he was a little lonely, and with Trump's election, I've been running a nonprofit that does science research, and I communicate science to the public. I do shows for the Discovery Channel and the Science Channel, but it seemed like it wasn't enough, and I wanted to make sure that what I see is the biggest threat coming down the pipeline for the next several decades is climate change, because it's a national security threat. So I said, I think I can address this. I mean, I actually have credible expertise, and I've done climate change research. And so I said, well, how can we prepare for this? So I blend that with my background of working in natural hazards and disaster preparedness, and I think that is bringing that and the fact that I'm trained in the scientific method and using facts and evidence to make policy. I think that's what we need, and I think that's something that a lot of people, doesn't matter your party affiliation, think, we need to be basing our decisions on facts. So here I am.
She's Jess Phoenix. You can go to jess2018.com to learn more about this campaign. I wanted to ask you, what was it, if you are elected, what are the goals? Are there small things that you want to do? It seems like you have big ideas, but I wonder what are those little things you want to do to get to your bigger goal?
Right. And, obviously, as a first-term lawmaker, it's not like you can go in and change everything the way you want it. I mean, there are 434 other members in Congress, so you have to be realistic with your expectations. But I think one of my main priorities is being a voice for science and science funding, because we're looking at cuts right now to the National Institutes of Health and to science research that helps investigate the causes and cures for cancer. We're looking at cutting NASA's Earth science budget, and that's how we figure out, well, when are the hurricanes coming? How severe are they going to be? Things like the earthquake early warning system, the tsunami warning system, volcano warning system, and the hurricane warning system. We need to prioritize those because we're going to be seeing more severe weather. So I want to ensure that we have full funding for science research, and I really want to prioritize education too, and making sure that our public schools have adequate funding. Now, we're really lucky here in Santa Clarita. We've got some really great schools, but in other parts of our community, in other parts of our congressional district, some of the schools need more help. And it's also a national issue because if we don't have a strong education, then we don't have a strong country. I mean, we need smart citizens to meet the challenges of the 21st century. So those are all important to me, but also, there's some common sense reforms that I think we need to put into place, and really in the short term. For me, and I know you guys are all aware of how our community was impacted by the Las Vegas shootings at Route 91. And, I went to high school in Littleton, Colorado. So that my boyfriend at the time went to Columbine. And so learning of people I knew's deaths on national news was not exactly an experience I'd wish on any 17-year-old. So I've carried that with me for a long time, and I think we're at a point where our legislators can really take the lead on common sense gun violence reforms. So like universal background checks and making sure that we fund the Centers for Disease Control to study the causes of gun violence and what we can do to reduce that. Because right now there's no funding for that. So I think being a congressperson who's not afraid to advocate for common sense reforms would go a long way. I mean, this is something that it's impacting everybody in one way or another. And I think we can take steps to make it better.
We're getting to know Jess Phoenix, who is running for the 25th Congressional District here in Santa Clarita, covers a wide territory.
Yes, it does.
It goes all the way up through Antelope Valley. Mm-hmm. And then Simi Valley as well. Pieces
and Porter Ranch.
Right,
yeah, Porter Ranch too.
Porter Ranch, which has its own issues, I know.
Yes.
But living in Acton, Jess, and of course knowing Santa Clarita, you mentioned our good schools. What do you think are the key most important issues here for us in the Santa Clarita Valley?
Well, I think it's something that it's thrown into relief by right now the tax plan that we're seeing. That's the GOP tax plan in the House and the Senate. Cost of living and affordability is a huge thing, and it's going to become more of an issue as more people move here and as our population grows. And along with that, I think having jobs that are going to last for decades to come in the face of automation. I mean, we have a large hospitality sector here, and we have folks who are looking at having their jobs replaced by robots. And that's not some sort of apocalyptic sci-fi fairy tale. That's something that's going to happen in the next 10, 15 years. So we need to make sure that, as a community, we're prepared to tackle the changes that we're going to see. So it's really, to me, making sure that people have good places to live, good schools, they have the health, the good health to get jobs done, and that we have jobs and skilled people who can fill needs in ways that we haven't even really started to address yet, which would be like the green tech sector. We need a lot. I mean, up in Lancaster, they're doing some great work in terms of reducing their carbon emissions and preparing for the green tech revolution, but I think that's something that should extend all the way here through Santa Clarita and over to Simi. We're ripe for it. So I think that we're, making sure our economy can support the number of people we have who want to live here and have this great quality of life is just key.
One of the areas you talked about a few minutes ago is the stellar school system we have here. And I know, having looked at your website, you're advocating that we have equal financing or funding going into all of our schools. Here in Santa Clarita, we're underfunded compared to the rest of most of the state. And the last numbers I saw, and they may be a little off, but the last time I looked, a student in LA Unified on the elementary school level was getting about $16,000+ a year, and here in Santa Clarita we're getting about $6,000 a year. It's not an equal playing field. So
right.
What's your thought on that, and how would you adjust that?
So I think that, tying school funding to property taxes is a problem, and because that also, of course, creates a split between haves and have-nots, and it punishes the children for no fault of their own. So we really need to make sure that we're prioritizing getting funds to all schools, and not just schools in more affluent communities, but also that we do that throughout the state and throughout our country. We have to be allocating resources so that students who may not have family support too, and may not have the ability to go to a private school, they get a good quality education with a teacher who's paid well enough to do his or her job, and with making sure that there are training materials available to those teachers. I mean, I taught at Cal State LA, and I work with students now with my nonprofit, Blueprint Earth. And, I see that when my nonprofit can go into a classroom and bring scientists in and give the students hands-on experiential learning, they just light up. And a lot of the times, like there was a study done by Cal Berkeley in 2011 that said that it was I forget the exact number, but it was the majority of teachers in the state who were supposed to teach science felt like they had not received any training in the last 3 years about science and how to teach it, and they felt unprepared. And that's scary to me because, I mean, I've sat there. I've had kids staring at me, a room of 40 people looking at you, expecting you to tell them something, and you're supposed to give them this knowledge that will prepare them for the future. So if our teachers aren't prepared and our schools don't have enough money per student, then we're going to suffer, and we can't afford that.
And things have certainly changed in science in just those 3 years. But back to the education side, we are an affluent community. Our property tax is attached to it, but we're not getting our fair share
Of the
back
state,
from
right.
the state. And it's really a state issue, not necessarily
Right.
a federal issue. But that's where the real discrepancy is. It has nothing to do with the property tax. It's the allocation of it. So how would you go about making adjustments there?
Yeah, like you said, it's more of a state issue, but I think that speaks to the importance of people getting out to vote, too. I think that for our area, we have a really great race. People may be aware Christy Smith is running for Assembly District 38, which is here, and she has worked in school board issues for a long time. And so I think that's somebody who would fight to bring a more proper allocation back home here. And I think that at the federal level, something that as a congressperson I could do would be to work to get federal grant money into our local communities. And that's something I want to do in terms of green tech, but also for education, because people learn in different styles. I mean, some people are visual learners, some people are audio learners, some people like to do hands-on work. And, especially with kids on the autism spectrum, they have a whole different set of learning challenges. And schools are doing a really great job now of addressing individual students, more so than in the past. But we have a lot of progress we still need to make. So I think it needs to be a concerted effort. So it needs to start with local folks explaining what the needs are of the community, and then moving up through the state level for allocating funds, and then having representatives in Congress who are not afraid to take a stand and say, hey, we need funding for this. Like, we need to work on getting federal monies and federal support for programs that may exist at the local level and the state level.
We're speaking with Jess Phoenix. She is, you can go to jess2018.com to learn more about her congressional for the 25th seat in Congress, for the 25th district, I should say, in Congress. Jess2018.com. We're going to take a quick break and we'll have more. You're not going anywhere, right?
Nope, I'll be here.
All right. And we're going to talk more with myself, Kyle Jellings, and Carl Goldman right here on your hometown station, KHTS.
KHTS strives to give the Santa Clarita Valley all the information they need. And when our computers aren't working the way they should, we call Resurgence, your true source for IT. Resurgence provides outstanding customer service while also providing the highest technical ability. They strive to do what's best to improve and protect your business. For more information on Resurgence, call 349-4114 or visit resurgenceit.com.
La Esmeralda is home to truly authentic Mexican food. This family-owned restaurant prides itself on its fresh-to-order menu. Even the tortillas are made in-house. If you have a taste for sizzling fajitas, menudo, flautas, or ceviche, you have to try La Esmeralda's Mexican and seafood restaurant. Dine in or order out for the most authentic Mexican food Santa Clarita has to offer. Their Taco Tuesday? It'll turn you into a regular. La Esmeralda on Bouquet at Haskell.
You've been assigned to plan your office party. Time to bring in the experts. AV Party Rentals is your go-to place for the most innovative holiday party ideas. AV's been planning Santa Clarita events from giant galas to intimate gatherings for longer than, well, since Rudolph was a young fawn. AV will turn your office party into a winter wonderland. See the latest holiday displays at Santa Clarita's favorite wedding, party, and holiday event rental store, AV Party Rentals on Newhall Avenue and at avpartyrental.com.
She's a pop music legend.
When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown.
The one and only Petula Clark, coming to Santa Clarita on Saturday, November 18th at the new Canyon Club in the Valencia Town Center.
Don't sleep in the subway, darling. Don't stand in the pouring rain.
Petula Clark, singing her string of classic hits from the 60s.
sign of the times that your love for me is getting so much stronger.
Petula Clark, and featuring our one and only local singing sensation, Savannah Burrows. Petula and Savannah, what better combination?
Downtown, things will be great when you're down.
Petula Clark and Savannah Burrows, Saturday, November 18th at the new Canyon Club in the Valencia Town Center. Tickets available at KHTS and at Ticketmaster.
It's time to put the pedal to the metal. I'm Alan Taylor, host of The Drive, your source for all things auto. Broadcasting from the Peterson Automotive Museum every Saturday morning from 6 to 9 a.m. right here on KHTS. Brought to you by your friends at Galpin Motors.
Hey Dodgers fans, check out the KHTS website at hometownstation.com. Get the latest news and sports happenings in our Santa Clarita Valley. Find out more about KHTS shows and our on-air features, plus receive incredible discounts with our restaurant roast certificates. That's hometownstation.com.
Your hometown station, KHTS.
221 on your hometown station, KHTS. I am Kyle Jellings, along with Carl Goldman and special guest Jess Phoenix. She is running for the 25th district, the California Congress 25th district. I've screwed that up, I think, 3 times now. But you can go to Jess2018 to learn 2018.com to learn more about her campaign. And I wanted to say, and I didn't say this during the break, but you said something during the break, and it's not bad, I promise.
No, go ahead.
But you said something that I really respected. You said, I'm a scientist, but I see some problems, and I want to fix them. So I really respect that, because you with politics especially, you see people that are lifetime politicians. And so I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit about being, you love your job right now.
Yeah. I run this environmental science research nonprofit. I get to teach science to all sorts of kids who would never have a chance to do field work. You know, they get out there, they do geology and biology, and we work out in the Mojave, about 2 hours from my house, but it's off the 15 near Baker. We are out in the preserve, and we're doing environmental work. We're doing cutting edge science. I love it. I don't want to be a career politician. Like that's not my calling. My calling is to do science and to discover more about the world around us. But, I see problems, and I want to go in there and solve them, and I want to go back and do my science research. But I think, that's what Congress, in particular the House, should be about. It was designed to be representatives of the people, not just an elite group who are different from everybody else, but everyday folks. And I'm like, that's what we need it to be. And I think we've got this real separation right now of career politicians and all the rest of us. And I think we need to start bridging that gap and sending people to Congress who are more like you and I.
So go ahead, Carl.
I was going to say, there are a number of issues that impact us here locally. Obviously, working the freeways, riding the freeways is on everyone's mind and is a challenge for everyone. From the transportation side of things, where the federal monies make a big difference.
Yes.
What would you change? What do you feel are the key issues there?
Well, thanks for asking, because I actually really like to talk about this. Our infrastructure is really out of date and really underfunded in terms of what we need in terms of repairs. I wasn't here in California for the Northridge quake, but that is like intro geology right there. When you first learn, you see the pictures of the pancaked freeways and apartment buildings, and the sad thing is that most of the roads and bridges in our country desperately need repairs. And the same goes locally. We need to be making sure that our transportation systems, our transportation infrastructure can meet the challenges that we're going to see. And then the same goes, a critical infrastructure that nobody thinks about is actually our cyber infrastructure. When you think infrastructure, you think water and electricity and roads. You don't generally think cyber. But my husband is he's the global cyber strategist for VMware, which is a company that does basically the back end of the internet. It's like the Microsoft no one's ever heard of. And so, cybersecurity is something I literally deal with on a daily basis because it's our dinner conversations. And our cyber infrastructure is so vulnerable. We're seeing all the evidence come out about Russia's interference in the election. And then the hacks, the Target hacks, the Sony hacks, and Equifax. That impacted about half of our country's population. And if you take away the people who don't have credit because they're too young or they've never opened any accounts, or you take away the people who are too old, not using it anymore, you're basically looking at most adults got hacked with that. So, I mean, our cyber infrastructure and even our data storage centers, our servers, these are vulnerable, particularly in case of what I see as our most pressing big-scale threat, which is actually the San Andreas rupturing. A major rupture of that section of the fault would damage not only our water and our power and our roads, but it would actually be devastating to our communications infrastructure and our data infrastructure. So these are things that, these are top of mind for me, and I think we need to be funding this stuff. It is so critical. I would rather have, I'd rather reallocate some of the money that we're spending on defense because I think infrastructure is a lot of how we prepare for national security issues.
Your dinner conversations are much more intense than mine. I'm worrying about fixing the lights on the Christmas tree, that strand of lights.
I was going to say,
I'm
just trying to get my kids to eat.
Yeah, Kyle's mourning the Dodger.
Oh, no, I'm mourning that too.
Okay,
Trust me.
good.
Oh, my
Good.
God.
All right.
Huge Dodger fan.
good.
So,
But while we're on transportation, what's your position on the high-speed rail?
Well, I would be able to throw a football and hit it from my house, one of the proposed routes that they're looking at. I'm all in favor of high-speed rail as a concept. I think that this particular high-speed rail initiative is going to be way too expensive, and it's not effective for what we need, for our community particularly. So I think that I'm all in favor of let's get high-speed rail across the U.S. ultimately. I mean, I've used it to travel when I've had to do work abroad, and it's great when you have it done right. It has to serve communities that need to be connected, and it has to have government investment, and it has to be bidded on fairly and be completed in a timely manner. So I think that this particular high-speed rail initiative, I don't think it's the right one for us.
And it's also going to impact a lot of neighborhoods in Santa Clarita, cutting
Yep.
through the Canyon Country side of town and going through right
by my
behind
house.
Sulphur Springs Elementary
Over
School.
here, yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a tremendous drain of money right now
Yes.
that the state could use for other elements of the infrastructure.
Yeah, and so I mean, well, I said in concept it's really good. I just think that there's a better way, and I think my scientist brain is always like, hey, get more information, get more evidence, get more facts, and then let's find a better way forward.
One of the biggest issues impacting Santa Clarita, and it's been an issue here for a couple of decades, and I can say our Congressman Steve Knight's done a lot of good work on this, and that's trying to stop the Suncemex mine here in
Yes.
Santa Clarita.
Yes.
What's your position on it, and what
I
would you
actually,
do if you were in Washington right now? What would you be doing differently that our congressman isn't doing?
Well, I have to actually say that his work has been pretty good. I mean, I agree with you there, and I think he's in that instance, he's responding to the community's needs. But I think that he could be stronger on it, actually. I think that, it's such a tricky issue because there's BLM land rights tied into it and everything, and it's a foreign company. So I think there's actually even more opportunity to push back and to say that we're not going to have this here. I mean, I'm sure anyone who's driven down the 14 has had a rock hit their windshield recently. So it's something that it affects all of us, even if we don't live right near that mine site. But, I, as someone who is a geologist, I know the damage that mining actually can produce. And there are residential neighborhoods right near there. So it's something that you've got to make the case, not just because everyone's saying it's bad. You have to actually present it as this is a health hazard, this is an environmental hazard. You got to look at it from like a multi-pronged approach and make those arguments very strongly and make sure that you're there with the local leaders and saying, like, what can I do? Like, do you want me to have a town hall about it? Do you want me to get the company executives to come here and meet? Like, how do I help the local folks on the ground be more effective with their efforts to stop that?
Actually, in fairness to our congressman, he has
done a lot of that, yeah.
a good chunk of that, and
Yeah.
and our city has led the charge with that for
Yes.
for many
City's been great.
many years, and doing town meetings, putting pressure on a lot of ways, and mixing it, and hopefully that's something that can get resolved
Yeah.
before the next election.
And
We'd love
this
to see that.
it's a similar thing too, though, with Aliso Canyon. I mean, Knight, he introduced that bill, that was his response, but then he also voted to neuter the bill afterwards. So it seems like, okay, well, you've given this support to saying Suncemex shouldn't operate, but with Aliso Canyon, we should be shutting that down. I mean, they cannot guarantee that it won't happen again. And, as a geologist, my husband jokes that I'm omnicidal, because I'll tell you the ways the earth will kill you depending on where you live. It's sort of what I do with natural disasters. But under Aliso Canyon, under the storage facility, the Santa Susana Fault runs through there, and it has the potential to rupture at a 7.2 magnitude. So that is devastating, and it would make last year's blowout look like nothing. And then there's the Honor Rancho facility as well that also has faults running right near it, and most likely under it as well. I believe there is one, but there probably could be more. I have to double check. But, these are things where these are massive storage facilities that are in an area that really impacts our community and could cause serious problems, should they happen. And in Aliso Canyon, that already did happen, and yet it's up and running again. And I think that's really problematic.
AM 1220 KHTS. We're talking with Jess Phoenix, the 25th Congressional District candidate for the Democratic Party. And I understand there's 3 candidates right now in the race and a few others that may be jumping in. So we'll see what happens come the November elections. Talking about some of the things on your website, you're advocating free tuition for all college students. Share your thinking about that.
So I think it just kind of plays back into what I said before about having an educated country is how we have a strong country. Having people who are just completely buried in student loan debt, and I speak as one of them. I've got a lot of it, and so does my husband. And my poor brother, he's got, I think, $160,000 in student loans. And so just will he ever be able to buy a house? I don't know. And a lot of the students I work with are new, and they're just starting into college. And many of them go to state schools, and so they have a more affordable tuition. But, when I taught at Cal State LA, I would see students who were working 2 to 3 jobs to afford their in-state tuition. And all they wanted was to get an education. And that, to me, that was really difficult to see, because every person deserves access to information. And I think that our state and our country would be better served if we have people who have an education that's solid under them, that they can rely on, and so that when they start their careers, they can then worry about buying a house and starting a family and, maybe having enough left over to go on a trip every once in a while, instead of going, oh, my student loan payments are $500 a month or $1,000 a month, or even $100 a month can be a hardship. It's not the scale of it, it's that it doesn't go away. And even if you go bankrupt, you can't get rid of it. So I think by making education truly democratic, it levels the playing field and says, look, we're going to give this to you so that you can go and make our country stronger, and you can start businesses and join the workforce and just go at it full steam.
And that's a great concept, but how do you pay for it?
Right. And so that's what I want to work on. And I think there's some really cool practical solutions that have been proposed. But, again, I'm a scientist. I want to see all the possible options. I want to look at how other countries have paid for it. I want to look at how states who have done free community college have implemented it and what has worked. And I want to make sure that we can do this and we can fund it, because I completely agree. Something I'm really opposed to is just going into debt as a nation just over and over and over again. So I think we need to make sure we're being fiscally responsible. But I think it will pay a lot of dividends if we can pull this off. And I think we'll see a lot of return on investment down the road.
One of the other concepts on your website, that's a terrific idea, but again, how does it work and what are the ramifications, is the $15 minimum wage?
Right. And I lived and worked in Australia for a while, and they have a $15 minimum wage. And it's also interesting because you don't tip there. So that took a while to get used to. People kept getting confused when I put a tip on the table. But it's really interesting because then you actually see folks who are able to have money to take a trip and go out and do things. And after the initial period where things adjust, it seems to level out a bit. And I think we can look to cities who've already implemented it and then, make sure that as we do it, we phase it in gradually, and we make sure that, we don't just arbitrarily say, okay, now we're going to raise it to 20 or 30. Like, we have to make sure that the other groups who are impacted, people who are, say, earning $18 or $19 an hour now, is their work going to be appropriately valued? Will they see a cost of living increase? And I think that really comes down to, we need to make sure that the folks who are starting businesses and who are running companies understand that having workers who have a livable wage mean that we save on other costs as a society. We don't have to be bailing people out if they can afford to live. So I think there's an argument to be made from an economic perspective that, you make sure that people can afford to exist and live in our modern society, and that we won't be having to give everyone handouts. People don't like giving people handouts. So it's like, well, then let's let them help themselves.
But how do you scale that down so that they're still entry-level jobs, so that that the kid that gets that summer job at Six Flags right down the block here at Magic Mountain still has that job without all of us paying $540 to go,
To go to Magic
spend
Mountain.
a day at Magic Mountain.
Yeah,
There's a check and balance in all this,
Yeah.
and it seems to me there needs to be some kind of cushion
Yes.
to allow for those entry jobs.
Yeah, and I think so. This is how I kind of approach a lot of things because my FBI parents are Republicans. So, for me, it's like what you have to do is you have to see what your end goal is. And if your end goal is, okay, $15 an hour minimum wage, that's a great goal. How do we get there? What are the steps that we need to take that are going to still allow entrepreneurs to do business and small business owners to continue to have staff? I think it's all tied into the healthcare issue as well. If they have healthcare that's portable, they can go to jobs and have job flexibility, and employers don't have the burden of paying for their employees' healthcare. So that's one reason that I'm actually for Medicare for all as well, because I think these are things that you can't really pull apart and deal with separately. I think they're things that you have to kind of say, well, living wages impact, what people are going to have money to spend on. Or if they don't have a living wage and they're on handouts and they're on their Social Security and their Medicaid and what can they do to add to our economy? Not much. So I think it's one of those things where we have to set the goal though, and we have to then say step 1, step 2, step 3, and it would be great if we could get there overnight. But I mean, everything moves at the pace of government, right? That's not fast. So we do have to start though with where we want to be.
Speaking of government, our federal government at the moment is weaving through tax reform, and I know you've been vocal about that. It keeps shifting, so whatever I'm saying is the case right now may have changed 5 minutes ago. But
Yes.
but what's your position on tax reform, and what would you like to see happen?
So we're due for tax reform. I mean, we typically overhaul our tax system about every 30 years, and we haven't done it since 1986. So 31 years, it's time. What I think is the problem right now is that you've got an administration that's desperate to have a win, and they haven't passed any major pieces of legislation. I mean, everything has been shot down. So I think right now it's sort of a desperation Hail Mary move, and it's wildly unpopular. The vast majority of people disapprove of the GOP tax bill, whether it's the House or the Senate bill. And the fact that they're now trying to ram in gutting the Affordable Care Act into the tax bill makes it even less popular, because the attempt to get rid of that has already failed a couple of times. So I think the real issue here is that this isn't bipartisan tax reform. That's what I want to see. I want to see bipartisan tax reform that really benefits people on the lower and middle income end of the spectrum and doesn't cut the corporate taxes. Because the reason to cut corporate taxes is if corporations are struggling. And that's not the case right now. Corporate profits are at record levels, and the stock market is just going crazy. It's booming. So I think that's not when you do a corporate tax cut. That's when you look at what you can do for working families. And the majority of folks here in our community and in this congressional district would actually take a hit from this tax package. And that, to me, that's just not right. I don't see how Knight could support that, because it actually hurts more people in our district than it would ever help. And it puts our country in debt. Like I said, I had a problem with that. So, I can't see supporting anything like that.
Part of the challenge right now is the bipartisanship has disappeared in our federal government and has certainly disappeared in our state government here in Sacramento, where everything is so polarized, and it's tough to find any centrists and really working towards solutions instead of just trying to take a position.
Yeah. I think it's a shame. I was a kid when Reagan was around, and I, like I said, Republican parents. So I actually really value the ability to work on a compromise basis. It doesn't mean you compromise your values, because I think that's what people really appreciate, and I think that's sort of what got people really excited about Trump and Bernie Sanders, was that they were saying, here's what I stand for, and they were saying it loudly. And so I think you can have your values, and you can disagree with people. You can say, well, no, I don't think that is right. But, as long as you say, look, okay, we're at 2 points here, but what do we agree upon? Find that commonality and then start working towards getting there. Again, it's incremental. It'll never move as fast as we want, and when you have a true compromise, nobody's 100% happy. But it gets you further. It moves the ball down the field. I mean, everything's a sports analogy for me. So, if you move the ball down the field, you're doing all right. And that's what I want to see. I want to see people elected to government who are willing to work across the aisle and, don't compromise their values, but are willing to say, okay, well, on this program, let's try this smaller step instead of this giant one first. But it's getting us towards where we need to be. And then I think that will resonate with the majority of folks in our country who aren't polarized. The polarized folks are the really vocal, loud ones, but that's not, everybody on the street. We're just going, why can't we talk common sense to each other? Why can't we have a dialogue? And I want to have a dialogue.
One final question before we end this, but it was a pleasure having you join us.
Thanks,
and we're
Carl.
sure we'll be seeing a lot more of you, Jess. We talked off air about this, how the last election really had some negative campaigning, particularly here on the local level. And the one thing we're encouraging and urging are that all the candidates take the high road and go for the positives, and I'm glad you've done that today.
I'm trying, yeah, and it should be that way. I mean, we're the other Democrats in the race. We all want the same thing. Even Steve Knight, he's a patriot. So I mean, I think that we're all in this together at the end of the day. And we shouldn't be looking at it as a chance to rip each other apart. It should be, hey, let's get the best person for the job, the best person to be a voice for our community, who's, even if they disagree with some people, is still going to say, you know what, I see what you're saying. Let me work on that.
She's Jess Phoenix. Go to jess2018.com to learn more about her campaign for the seat in Congress for the 25th Congressional District. Jess, it was a pleasure having you. I appreciate you coming by.
Thanks, Kyle. It was great to be here, and thank you, Carl.
For Kyle Jellings, Carl Goldman, and Jess Phoenix, you're listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.